Okay, we got a hot mic. I'm here with Ron Hawkins and James. James, what's your last name?
James Bergman.
James Bergman. He was not a participant in the candidate forum the other day, October 4th. It was a League of Women's Voter candidate forum on October 1st. Did I say 4th? I don't even know what I said. But anyway, it was myself, Ronald Hawkins, the Democratic write-in candidate. I'm the Libertarian candidate. There was also the Republican who declined to show up. Shame on him. And Luke Howell, the Democratic candidate, who you lost to only by 80 votes.
Less than 80, actually.
Less than 80 votes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then John Pietra, the Green Party candidate. And so what Ron and I wanted to do, and James got roped in here, he's been to a couple of our Libertarian meetings, to discuss this forum in a little bit more expounded ways, because we're not afforded the time, I don't think.
No.
60 seconds. Voters, people, citizens that don't participate in politics and things like these forums, it's hard to get your idea across in just 60 seconds. At least it is for me. So I'm going to cut parts of this out, of course, as we're watching this. But first one up is John Pietra, and the question, I don't know, what was the question? Do you remember?
It was opening. You're at the opening statement.
Oh, it's the opening statement. Thank you, Ron. I'm glad you're here. So, what are your thoughts about John Pietra's intro? Anything?
Yeah, interesting background.
Interesting background.
He's got some qualifications. He doesn't seem very prepared for this little 60-second snippet. Maybe didn't know it was that long. I don't know.
In full disclosure, unlike the environmental town hall from Western, nobody here, to all our credit, nobody here was given questions ahead of time. So one of the things I found very difficult, maybe you did too, is when it was your turn to go first, not knowing the question, you could barely write it down in time and barely formulate a thought, which is totally fine. I just wish
In no time.
that they would have given us, I don't even know how you would do that, but I wish they would have given us a little, like a 10-second pause.
My problem was they had the who's up list, but I never saw that because all I saw was myself on the.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not a Zoom person. I'm not a social media person.
So I wrote it down, actually. These are my notes from when we did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote down here, John, he did 10 years in government, like another decade in private practice as an attorney, representing this, people. I'm not sure what sector of law that was in. And he did some nonprofit work.
But the one thing I did was he didn't say what level of government he was in.
What level? Yeah.
You don't know. Was it local? Was it state? Was it federal? What was it?
I don't know.
Yeah, and that's I didn't touch it because.
One of the interesting things about John's comments too, I thought, was in his intro, was that he said something like, government can run as efficiently as business. Which is weird to hear that coming from a Green Party guy.
Yeah.
Do you think? What do you think?
Well,
I would think so.
But you're talking to somebody who ran an office that was recognized as the best in the world for 2 years consecutively. I understand where he's coming from, but I also we'd get annual inspections. Well, one year they came out and I got written up as a frugal manager because I spent 78% of my allocated budget. Now, you would think that's a compliment. Mm-hmm. In the government, it's not. So I looked at somebody else that I thought really ran a good office, and he spent 110 to 114% of his allocated budget. So monkey see, monkey does. And hey, it still worked. We were still the best office in the world. And they magically found the money. And the way the government budgets, every year you pad it by 10% more. That's the insanity.
I'm already asking questions though. Okay, John Pietra, nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you see government run as efficiently as business? And does business really run that efficiently? I know many, many big corporations and companies I used to work for, they don't run efficiently at all. They waste a ton of money, ton of time. They got people doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. It goes on and on. So that comment to me just strikes me in just different ways that it might not strike others.
And that's why point, where was he at in the government to see what he saw? I was in basically the world's biggest bureaucracy, which was the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
But when I talk to people that's in the corporate world, it's the same BS that we faced in the federal government. You know, it's the way a bureaucracy works. It's an inverted pyramid. So if you want to be on the top, you got to grow, expand out, and it's insanity.
You mean you have to grow your fiefdom?
Yeah,
More budget
yeah.
dollars and more allocation.
Not
of
just the
resources?
fiefdom, people.
People, yeah.
Oh yeah, when our wonderful president Billy Clinton came along, he decided you had to have 10 people for every one supervisor. Well, the supervisors figured that out, so they designated people, work leaders, and it was basically a subordinate supervisor without any authority.
You mean they changed the title just because it
Pretty-
wasn't supervisor?
Yeah, they
it
were
was-
creative because they didn't want to have to actually supervise 10 people. They liked to have 2 or 3 people. And then I had one supervisor, whenever we'd get a visit from an official, for 1 week, it would be, what if they asked this question? So a bureaucracy wastes a tremendous amount of time on what ifs. And I see our good governor, she's got more what if commissions than you could ever shake a stick at. And she still hadn't figured out how to run anything right.
So we extracted a lot out of that intro. Let's move on to Luke Howell. I literally have written here on my piece of paper, Luke-Gravel. This guy is obsessed with his gravel problem. John Pietra in the environmental thing that you didn't see, and nor did you, I don't think. He talked about the gravel thing again, and John Pietra was like, hey, there's a lot of NIMBYism out here. Not in my backyard, and you've mentioned that before. This is the biggest NIMBY on the ballot. Not in my backyard. People who want infrastructure, they want to pave roads, they want to do this, but they don't want to dig up the ground to do any of it. But so let's watch his clip here and then comment. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Okay, what did you think about his intro? As someone who has probably never heard any of this video, right?
I have none.
That's why it's nice that you're here.
All right. I mean, he sounds like he's got good intentions. He seemed a little confused about what might be the best way to get to what he wants. But I mean, that's just probably based on what he's been told, unless, he's bought out somehow, but I doubt that. I think it's just misinformation, that's what I'm assuming.
Pretty much naive.
What do you got?
Well, since he was my opponent in the primary, I got a lot of things I think about.
And we're talking about this specific segment.
This specific
where he
thing.
talked about, going to 2 schools, being a plumber, the NIMBY thing.
The problem I see is Luke doesn't recognize what a state representative should be focused on. He really doesn't. A gravel pit is a county or a township issue. He's going on about the state government. Well, if the township and the county can't resolve their problem, then what's he doing? I mean, it made little sense to me when he told me that was his big issue, was the gravel pit. Well, who's forcing that down his throat? Is it, you got a zoning commission, and you got a township, and you got a county. So I have yet to figure out what is he trying to do as a state legislator, because he's got no other issues he's ever discussed that affect anybody in the 63rd district. And he doesn't realize the 63rd district's bigger than Richland. It goes all the way to Homer in Calhoun County. So there's a whole lot of people out there that probably aren't all that worried about a local issue, which is a gravel pit.
Well, what struck me was, I went to this school, I went to that school, I'm a pipe fitter. How much education does being a pipe fitter need? Usually I would think it's more of a trades, OJT, sort of on-the-job training type thing, but maybe not. I know you got to get licenses, and especially to be a union member of the local whatever. Now, libertarians, you'll agree, you got a union, although you're a Democratic JFK type, and I'm left-leaning libertarian, so I think we have a lot in common. But I think I'm pro-union. I'm pro-free association. Yeah. If you want to be in a union, great, be in a union. I was a member of a union once in my life, working for UPS in college. It wasn't terrible. The schooling thing was weird. His message and his intro seemed unfocused. I was born here, I went there, I do this, and I got a gravel pit. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And the NIMBYism thing comes back over and over and over with this guy.
You know, there's some other issues. When I went saw what his supporters had written about me on his Facebook page, and he kept that from day one prominent where everybody could see it, accusing me of being a Republican running as a Democrat. And I'm trying to figure out who is this guy, and I looked at it. I don't do social media, so I finally think there's nothing there on him. So I did find out he had a Facebook page, and I went to that based off of Ballotpedia. And that was the day before the election. I went and saw him and told him I didn't appreciate that. But
he physically drove there.
Drove there. We had a 30-minute conversation, and he's a decent enough guy, but like I said, he's very naive, and he got it in his brain that he's going to run a $0 campaign. Well, when you fill out your affidavit, it's got a block on there that it reads very plainly. If you're going to spend less than $1,000, you ask for a waiver. Well, the guy can't even read what he's signing because he didn't ask for the waiver. And now he's got a fairly large amount of election law violations, fines. Because when we told him about it, after I found out, I went to him and said, "You got this problem?" "Well, I'm too busy. I don't have time." Well, what's that tell me? If he's too busy to take care of his own problem, what's he going to do for a constituent that's got a problem? Probably not a whole lot. So
You've had different interactions with Luke than I have had.
yeah, and that's why I said that.
And in full disclosure, I've emailed Luke Howell many times. I've done a video on Luke Howell, how a vote for Luke Howell is a total waste of time, a total waste of a vote for a Democrat. He's putting in very little effort, $0. I think he even talks about it somewhere in this town hall. We're trying to run a $0 campaign. It's like, what planet are you living on where you think you could have a $0 campaign? Now, if you were a celebrity, maybe you could, because you've got the
Brand recognition of
the
your own
brand.
business.
Yeah, you've got the brand. I mean, Donald Trump to a degree did that, right? He only spent like $65 million of his own money in what should have been like, a huge $200 million effort on his campaign. But so to a degree, I mean, you've got some cash value, so to speak, with your brand there. But he's got none of that.
Well, see,
no signs, nothing.
That was my problem, because if you look at the election, there was over 7,000 votes, and I lost by less than 80 votes, and there were two problems. Actually, three. One, he ran a Republican-type campaign against me, which reminded me of Nixon. Slime the guy as much as you can. The second thing, Ballotpedia and their infinite wisdom, whenever people looked at me, it linked to the Libertarian Party, which I ran as a candidate in 2018. So again, people are very misinformed. They think Libertarians are Republicans. They're not, folks. They're not. There's a spectrum.
Absolutely.
And the third thing, now I've lost my train of thought like Joe Biden, but the third thing is it just irritates the heck out of me that you got a guy that's incompetent, that's never put any of these qualifications out there. From day one, I had a webpage. I've listed what I've done in my life. And there's a lot of things that I've accomplished, and I understand a bureaucracy. I understand how to make things work. And you're talking to somebody that had an area of responsibility in the last job he had overseas that ran from Japan all the way to Diego Garcia, which, for those that don't know, that's south of India. So I had a very large area that I was responsible for. You're talking to somebody that's not afraid to sit down and talk to a 3-star general or a private. I've dealt with all of them. We all put our pants on the same and walk away. So, I'm not going to be intimidated if I'm in Lansing. I don't think Mr. Howell's got that ability, but that's just me.
Next up, moving along, is a super uber loser. There's some loser called Rafael Wolf here. Let's listen to what this guy has to say. Now, I noticed they spelled independence wrong. But hey, other than that, we can't be too critical. That guy wasn't terrible, whoever he was. What do you think about that, honestly? That's my strategy.
And that's.
But does a voter care?
You want to know what my wife told me?
Yeah.
And I tend to listen. After 38 years, I've learned you listen to your wife. She told me after the last election, don't ever run as a Libertarian ever again, because you either run as a Democrat or a Republican or don't run. Now she's asking me why the devil I'm even running. But that's really what it came down to. If you want to get in a position where you can be effective as a legislator, you have to get elected. And I looked at Ron Paul, I looked at his son. You know, they're libertarian in a lot of their mindset, but to get elected, you have to run under one of the major party banners.
Justin Amash, he's supposedly a libertarian.
And that's
I debate that, but I mean,
and I do too. That's what started me in all this, because the wife told me to run for U.S. Congress, which I think I'm probably more qualified than a state rep, because I didn't grow up in Michigan. And I'll be honest with you guys got a screwed up government here.
Well, Justin Amash took the nuclear option to change parties. And of course, Republicans. He did that.
Actually,
he did that after Republicans ripped the rug of monetary support.
But he ran. He changed to independent. He didn't run.
Well, he did. You're right. No,
Yeah.
he went independent first, and then he went libertarian.
Well, he went libertarian because he had no home,
and he was thinking about running for the presidency, though.
Anybody that sits on the committee that's going to reauthorize the Patriot Act, that hadn't got the balls to stand up and say, "Kill this thing," is not a libertarian. And Justin Amash is not a libertarian, folks. As much as they want to claim he is, he didn't have the guts to stand up to that committee chairman, because they'd already kicked him off in a bunch of committees and he didn't know what to do.
Now I will say, before you give us your opinion, that you could just go guns a-blazing and be very critical of what I said in my position. I will say that I am self-critical of the things that I say, and I could see how there's a lack of potential appeal to a Democrat or a Republican who listens to that and says, why would I want to minimize my power? I'm gung-ho. So really my net is cast toward the left-leaning, more independent people that say, you know what? Yeah, I do vote for Democrats all the time and nothing seems to change. Or, yeah, you know, sometimes I do left, sometimes I do right. And I'm a flip-flopper or a swing voter, as they say. So that's really who that message is geared toward. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but I think it makes sense that making everybody a minority is. But it does have criticism, and it's not without.
Well,
so, what do you think? What do you think?
I mean, it's definitely important to be always open-minded and try to get those people that are on the fence if they're there in the first place. But I mean, people that are pretty entrenched in the two-party system aren't going to really listen to any of that at all. Even if it appeals to me, based on what I know, I mean, it's not going to appeal to every Democrat or every Republican out there, of course. I definitely do want to, reduce the power that they have, the two-party system, like having all parties be a minority party, having more parties in general instead of a two-party system definitely has a lot of appeal. You actually get something done where actually what you're doing is actually looked at, rather than just have a D or an R next to your name. You're going to get the vote, regardless of what your experience is or how you voted and any kind of policies. I mean, that's definitely important, but getting people to listen to it is not very easy.
One of the things I couldn't touch on in this 60 seconds is that the Republicans have the majority. They've got 58 votes. They can do anything they want, and therefore 52 Democrats is literally zero. It should be zero representation. They have no voice. Mm-hmm. They can paper push and complain all they want, but they don't have the votes to get a single thing passed. It's all Republicans all the time, and that's my point. And I wish I would have had time to sort of say it like that, because when you say it like that, that gets Democrats interested, I think. To say that, yeah, you've got to representatives from maybe other districts, right? Let's say you're a Democrat living in the 63rd, yet you've got a Republican representative, but you're like, hey, I still have some Democrats in other districts, and we've got people up there in Lansing. No, you don't. No, you don't. They have zero, and that's my point. And I don't think I was as clear about that in my intro.
It's a good point, but most Democrats are going to hear that and they're just going to double down to the Democratic Party rather than trying to jump ship.
Because they want to maximize their power, not minimize.
What was funny in 2018 when I went around, I had more than one Democrat. Well, if you were a Democrat, I'd voted for you. Well, that doesn't change me. That doesn't change me as a person, folks. I'm, and that's why another reason I ran as a Democrat, because there needs to be some moderate voices instead of these people that's going off the socialist cliff. And that's why I ran, and quite honestly, I won Calhoun County. It was a little niche up in Richland that Luke had gone around knocking on doors I'm 70 years old. I don't know if COVID's good, bad, or indifferent. I stayed home. I did the Joe Biden thing. I stayed in my basement.
All right, so what we're going to do after the intro here, because Ron's up next, after the intro, we're just going to fly through straight, without stopping, all 4 candidates, and then we'll comment. That
Okay.
way we can go a little faster here.
Well, let's move on to our...
Hey! Ron finally got done. You know, you weren't the only one having internet problems. Julie Rogers in the Environmental Forum cut out many times.
Well, she's probably got Comcast too.
What's funny, no, she's on Charter actually. 'cause
Oh,
I know
well,
the
they're just
neighborhood
as
where
bad.
I know the neighborhood where she lives. But what was funny was like, it's like, wait a minute. Here, where I'm at, where I was at in this video, and we're at right now, I've got CTS Telecom Fiber.
Yeah.
And the public media network people are also on CTS Telecom Fiber, and I don't even know where this thing was streaming from, but it had no problems.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate enough to have good connectivity, and I specifically come here for that. If I did this at my house on wireless, or something, God knows what would happen.
I'll tell you, there's a big.
I don't even know what you said actually.
I don't remember now.
What are your thoughts? I don't remember what the hell Ron said.
I think he said his name.
Nobody remembers me.
And then it broke
Out of
up and he said,
JFK, who the hell's that? I don't know.
Thanks for letting me be here.
You want to get shot, Ron? Is that what you want to do?
Well, I probably would if I went to
You want to get
Washington.
assassinated? I think you're getting that right now. Okay.
No.
So let's move on. We're just going to go straight shot here, all 4 candidates, and then. Okay. First of all, he says something about what would you do to improve voter turnout and the election process, and also considering COVID-19. Do you remember that? And one of the problems I had, even before Luke gets started, and I know I said we were going to watch this and didn't talk, was the multiple questions in a question. Oh, are you a pants or shorts guy? And if you choose pants, how is that discriminatory towards shorts? It's like, wait a minute. As an example, maybe that's a bad example.
and-
There's just multiple questions inside of a question. It was hard for me to track any of that.
And what as a candidate are you going to do?
In
Not a-
60 seconds, you got to answer like 3 questions in a question.
Yeah. And again, as a candidate, what are you going to do?
Okay, so let's watch it now. No interruptions. Shame on you for. Okay, here we go.
That's a tough one.
Could you imagine being John Pietra's child? What's the recycling program look at the Green Party house?
Well, my question is, they don't teach cursive in school anymore, so how do people know how to write? Can you imagine that nightmare if you're trying to count that stuff?
Well, I don't really have any. I don't really have any further thoughts about. That's another actually valid point. I mean,
That's
the manpower, the labor power it takes to count all that stuff. But on the other side, if you're digitizing it, you've got
You've also
computer
got-
fraud.
Yeah.
You know,
You
discs getting lost, information not being transmitted. I mean, there's lots of problems in elections.
Reprogrammed.
This is a massive question, and we all, I think, answered it. Okay.
Actually, the way, to be honest with you, machine, I don't know if it's the whole state, but I know in Calhoun, the paper ballot goes in the machine. It seems to be a good way
standard
to
process.
do it. Yeah, it's a standard process.
I want to do that, yeah.
And it's the same way. My concern is the way that the governor and secretary of state did it this year, where they sent dogs, cats, and everybody else mail-in ballots. That didn't make a lot of sense to me.
John LaPietra, I think, had probably the best answer in the sense that what he believed the integrity of the election should be. Countable, available, you know, he had it pretty
Recountable.
well knocked down, I thought.
Yeah.
I think what I had done was just identified the problem, said maybe there's other things we could do like multiple day, you know, some technology in there because that's my business, that's the way I think. I think there's problems with some of the things that I'm saying. There's problems with some of the things he's saying, like you're saying.
Yeah.
The physicality of it all is can be
it goes
difficult.
back to my point. The integrity of the vote is what's critical. That really is what it
You know what I would like to see is where I have my ballot and I get a little receipt tab and I can log into a frickin' website and look on there
Let's see where
and
it got
verify that got, you know, that I voted this way.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. So all these things, scanner, hand count, whatever. Guess who gets to count them, by the way? by
Democrats
law.
and Republicans.
Democrats and Republicans, by law, it says they have to have one of every party. They got to do this and do that. It's just Democrats and Republicans watching each other is all it is.
Well, and
Who trusts that?
And the other point I was making back a while back was, put the thumbprint. That's the way they do in Asia. That's a legal document.
Yeah.
Plus, you got DNA, so you know who needs to go to jail if they're falsifying things.
What are your thoughts on any of our answers to this question of voter turnout and the election process? Nobody said anything about COVID, by the way, so maybe
Right.
Gordon Evans didn't ask that question.
I mean, maybe they're just
Nobody
thinking about
cares.
this in general, but instead of just this year's COVID problems of voting. But like, yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying earlier, that the voting needs to be accessible to everybody. I think that it's an issue just having it all. Everybody thinks it's just November 3rd or 4th, and then it's done and announced. So I think it'd be better if it was just kind of spread out a little more. People have time to put their votes in multiple different days, and maybe the results aren't announced ahead of time, so people can't,
I think the biggest challenge is the fact that they got to have poll workers over multiple. But like for even a 3-day period, they could figure out how to do that.
Oh, for sure.
Two things. One thing we didn't touch on was primary elections, the thing you took part in. I hate the fact that taxpayers have to burden the expense for that. It's just a bunch of party infighting to figure out who's going to run. And then people that don't like what I have to say about that are like, oh, well, there's also ballot issues.
And
well,
that's
chop
the- and
those
that-
off and put those in the general
Yeah.
and call it a day
Because-
and let the parties go pay for that nonsense.
Because everybody wants to run a millage issue through on the primary
Because
because
not-
you're getting 15 to 20% of the people voting that's actually going to pay the bill.
So a minority of people get to choose for the larger electorate. These are only people that vote, by the way. It's not even the people that don't vote, right?
Right.
But so to a degree, even in that scenario, this minority of people get to figure everybody. But it's this very small minority of people who get to pick on millage issues for the larger body, and yet even a larger body when you include people that don't vote at all. But hey, that's their problem. So yeah, I have a problem with that too. I was going to say one more thing about the comments here, but I forget what it is.
Dang, Joe
So-
Biden's rubbing off.
So let's move on. Here we go. So this was like a 3-part question. You got 60 seconds to answer it, and I get to go first. And let me think here. I got my notes right here. What did I say? Education outcomes and readiness. Pandemic COVID-19. That's what I wrote as my notes. All those words, right? You can see them right here. So this is how I answered it, because as I'm writing that, now I got to answer.
Right.
And I could barely formulate a thought. And on the prior question, he said, "Oh, if you need me to repeat the question," I should have had him just repeat the question.
Repeat the question,
Which would have,
please.
yeah. You repeat the question.
Good politician move. You're learning.
It's like I should have done that. Okay, but I didn't. Here we go. Okay, so I think that Luke Howell's "We Need More Trades" stuff. I mean, this question to me is huge. In Battle Creek, for example, they got a $50 million grant from the Kellogg Foundation to convert the school into a trades-based STEM education academy. Science, technology, engineering, math. When you come in as a freshman, you have to pick. Where are you going to go? Those 4. And what it is to me is nothing but a widget creator for the manufacturing base that they want in Battle Creek. And so it's not necessarily about teaching kids to think or
Critical
learn,
thinking.
but to do. And I think there's some danger there. I'm not an educator, but it concerns me. So
Well-
Luke's point about doing all this tech training and stuff may be valuable, but then you go look at certain industries like the housing industry. How do they build walls? I just watched a program about a company in Boston. The guy's like, well, there's not a lot of tradespeople, so what we've done is we're building walls in a factory with lathes that cut the doors out perfectly, the windows perfectly, it insulates it perfectly with multiple different kinds. You want spray foam? We've got that. You want cellulose? We'll drop that. We'll even make it as dense as you want. I mean, to the T, these walls, right? Then they truck them out They plug them in, they build them like Legos. And guess what? One guy was standing in the factory. It was a ghost town in there. It's all robotic. So Luke doesn't even think like forward, like in those terms in his answer.
Yeah. But when I went to school, my junior and senior year, I was in vocational training. So I got the hell out of high school half a day to go learn how to be a mechanic.
And are you a mechanic today?
No, because they had a little thing called Vietnam come along, and that kind of screwed everybody's life up when you got out of school back when I was there.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I had an expert as a counselor that told me I should go to college and take mechanical drafting. I like drafting, so the part that he didn't tell me is I had to understand geometry to do that. So when you get a D in your major at Purdue the first semester, things aren't looking too well. So I had a choice. The Marines were drafting, the Army was drafting, and I joined the Air Force right quick. So, that's what I'd say.
So Air Force was your career choice technically, right? I mean, the military, the armed forces.
The odds were better.
Yeah.
I joined the Navy. I'm not sure if that's what you're pointing at me for.
No. I mean, any thoughts on what anybody said, including myself, are wrong?
But and that's what I say is, I'm from a different era. I have I got over 70 years of life I look at.
True.
And I think differently than a lot of people. And that's kind of my problem with Luke. He's very naive in a lot of his thoughts. And as you said, I don't think he thinks way up ahead.
Well,
Future farmers, you go out here, it's factory farming. You got computers running and tractors and everything else now. It's a whole different world. And I grew up on 200 acres. It's very different back then.
John Pietra, I have down here, is concerned about the career academies. I don't think he called them career academies, but...
Well, then let's face it. When you go to college, you don't know what the hell you want to do. You figure life comes along, you figure things out when you're 25, 26, if you're lucky.
That's just it. They want these poor little freshmen in high school to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives.
And then the other thing, they tell you, oh, well, you have 5, 6, 10 different jobs in your lifetime. That was the mantra that I remember a few years back.
Yeah.
That's what my son went through. My son and I had a talk. Now he's 35, 36, I don't even remember now, 36. And up until he's about 30, I kept telling him, grow your ass up, because he'd call me up and ask me the stupidest questions. And then finally, the light bulb came on. He said, Dad, I was glad I was in military school with you when we were overseas, because I didn't get this indoctrination. When I was in the junior high and high school, I got this indoctrination crap. And I thought like a lot of these people now that's going crazy socialists. He says, now I got out, got a job, and actually grew up, I realized that's a bunch of crap.
Well, I don't think the education system is working as well as it could, for sure.
No.
I say more control to the individual, the families, the child as well. Don't leave it all up to the parents. If the kid has opinion of what they want to do. If they want to do some trade school or what would you call it, charter for a certain job. I mean, if we could give that option, that'd be nice. Also, looking at what systems have worked better than what we have. I've heard all the time Finland has a really good education system. If we can steal some of their ideas, maybe we should. I mean, if it works for them, maybe it could work for us.
Well, our school system was modeled off a German turn of the century German model.
Industrialism or whatever.
Industrial basis. They line you up and out you go. So and I had this discussion in Marshall, this lady, because my theory is the money follows the child. Now, I'll get called a Republican all day long for saying that, but when you go out and talk to people, a lot of people believe that. The parent is responsible for the child's education. And if you want to have your kid homeschooled, then you ought to get a tax break. But unfortunately, our Michigan Constitution's written, public money goes public schools, period. And I just think education's drifted away. It used to be, my parents would go to a parent-teacher association meeting. Now, when my kids were in school, we go to sit down with each teacher and go over what they did in their class. Well, it's not quite the same as when I grew up. And the principals, they ran the schools, not some school superintendent from way back when. And you didn't have consolidated schools.
The
to speak of.
administrative level is heavy.
Yeah,
as opposed-
it's foolish.
Yeah, the university system's like that too.
Yeah.
Heavy administration. Why do you think tuition goes up? Like better benefits, better
Well,
pay, more administration.
And why should a football coach get money at a professional level in a college? You know, they ought to be capped to what the President of the United States makes. And if that's not good enough, then go find a professional team and get your ass out of college.
Well, here in Kalamazoo, that's why what's his
aren't making
name?
money.
That's why what's his name left Western because they weren't going to pay him enough. He wanted to go to a bigger school. He went out there to Minnesota. You know,
PJ Fleck?
That's his name. What else? I was going to say something else about this. The education system to me, and I did not answer that question well because again, I was the first one to go, and I was like, "What am I couldn't even organize my thoughts correctly." But education, you know, there's a lot of jobs out there that kids could potentially do that's not covered under STEM. Dog grooming, hairdressing. A lot of these jobs.
Well, my problem is they don't teach you.
Executive
They-
producer of a TV show.
they
I mean, it
don't-
goes on and on and on, but
There's-
things not covered.
There's no financial management taught anywhere in the school system.
Oh.
You know, you're not trained to think that way.
I remembered. Well, sorry to interrupt you. I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I took place in the Battle Creek. This was just last week. The Battle Creek Career Education Day or whatever. I talked to these freshmen in a panel with other people. And it was a technology panel, and there were 3 people, and there was actually 5 people, all of which didn't really have a college education, although I do, in that field. They kind of fell into it. They just self-educated them, you know, and on-the-job training. The lady who is the IT director in Battle Creek came from the GIS department, which is like topo maps and that kind of stuff, you know, where stuff's at. I mean, it's a very difficult job. Lots to keep track of and detailed and keep it going. But the other guy was like, he worked for the Department of Transportation in their IT department, and he didn't have any formal anything. And one of the guys that commented, he's like, "Oh my God," because somebody asked the question, "What kind of education do I need?" And I was like, "Well, it's more of what you can do, what you can get experience in, and self-taught. I mean, you can go teach yourself programming, right?
Yeah.
And online. And so, you know, what can you demonstratively do?" And the other guy was, and I said, when I hire, I don't look for a computer degree. I look for what you can do. And so the other guy was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad somebody said that because I don't have any formal education." Then the other guy was like, "Yeah, I don't have any formal education either, but this is what I do, and I have a pretty good career to make a lot of decent dollars," which kind of proves the point that guiding freshmen into STEM doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to end up doing, or that it's even right for them. I mean, what are you teaching them really?
Yeah.
When these guys fell into it and self-taught.
Look at Gates.
Yeah.
There's something I was at KVCC. They do this C360, which is a combination of your personal, strengths, your interests, your dislikes. A personality test is part of it. They take like a battery of different tests, plug it into some algorithms, and kind of spit out different job possibilities. How much school will make you like an expected income? How many job openings are coming open in, if it's going to take you 4 years for this program, how many jobs are there going to be created in the state of Michigan, projected in 4 years? How many is going to be out there, new jobs and that? Sometimes it'd say 8, like it's pretty accurate, I'd imagine.
8 jobs?
8 in the state of Michigan.
In the whole
for
state.
like, I don't even remember what program I was looking at, but they'd give you all that information.
Turkey inseminator. How many jobs?
I don't think that was in there.
That's
like-
a job though.
You're like dental hygienist or something, like
I saw that on
specific
Dirty
stuff.
Jobs and almost hurled how they
Yeah,
use
so
those.
I
abuse those
did want
turkeys.
to bring out one more point on education. When I talked to a person,
8 jobs, huh?
they were worried about a 2-tier educational system in the United States.
Isn't that we already have that with private schools?
Well, and that was the point I made to her. I said, look at the people in Washington that's making policy. How many of those went to private school? And, you know, it
Most
kind of just blew through her whole theory that you're creating. There is a two-tiered system.
There's actually more tiers than that, because if you look at Native American tribes, they segregate themselves from the educational institutions
Yeah.
of public schools because they want to reteach and rebuild their traditions.
Right.
Not that that's bad, I'm just saying that there's all kinds of forms of education, including the free-range kids now. And I know a family where I used to live in Lafayette, West Lafayette and Lafayette, that are like free range, and these kids are freaking brilliant. The
Yeah.
mom takes them to the library, they go to the water treatment plant, they, parks and different zoo trips, and they get an immersion and just different things, and they get interested, and they read. I mean, these kids are brilliant, and they're free rangers, but the mother has time to go do that, and that's an issue for, poor, working families, right? I think almost to a degree that schools have become the babysitter
Yeah, they have.
for the
They
children.
And there's no discipline. That's the other thing. When I was in school, I got to visit the principal frequently.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to anymore, yeah.
Yeah, well, the standard
Better or
was
worse?
3 whacks on, bend over, pull your pants down, 3 whacks. If you really screwed up, you get about 6. Mine was just praying he'd never go home and tell my father, because I knew I'd get about 20 more after that. But that's the way it used to be, and kids didn't talk back to teachers. Teachers had respect. That's why the society's the way it is now.
How did they used to teach tests when you went to school? Because, like, I know
They don't teach. They
I know an
teach.
educator now that's like, we do spreadsheets and we teach to the test.
No.
So what are they doing now? There was some of that when I was in school, but not a ton of it.
No,
I think
when-
we've migrated more to a Chinese model. You know what I mean? And we've talked about this before,
Well,
where it's like, hey, you need to know the bubble. You need to know the answer.
that's
They teach you how to take a test better.
That's it. And
That's how they get
no,
the
that's
funding.
not the way.
Zero academic freedom.
When I went to school, you had the book. They give you a test. What you learned out of the book. And it was very simple structure. When I was in the first grade, you learned addition, add and subtract. Then you went to the second grade, you learned multiplication. You went to the third grade, you learned division. That stuff I can do in my head. My kids are so puzzled that I can do that. But those are the basics that we've gone far away from that we need to get back to. But you've got all these, and this is why I love experts. You got all these experts. When I was a kid, we had the experts. They decided, you don't need to learn phonics. Just put it in your brain, you'll remember it. I can't spell to save my ass. And that's the
How do you
hardest
spell
thing.
ass?
Well, the ass is ASS, but the only
No, I thought you were going to say HALL.
well, that too, or HOWELL.
Hey now. Poor
but
Luke.
they all start with H, just like me. The thing is, I felt crippled most of my life till I found out John Kennedy had the same problem, because the experts in Massachusetts had that brilliant idea too.
There you go.
So when people talk about medical experts and all the science, folks, that's a bunch of BS. Get it out of your head. They're just like you and me. They might know and they might not. It's an opinion on their part.
Well,
Galileo was a problem because
I-
he didn't think
I
right.
think it's a lot like food. You need a diverse diet.
Yeah.
And education is a lot like that.
Well, I made the wife quit beating my kids' hands with the ruler because that's the way she was taught, and that's not going to work with me.
I kind of would come out in defense of experts here a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm missing the point here, but I mean, you can't.
How dare you contradict what we're saying? No,
Oh,
I'm just
no.
kidding.
I feel like you can't expect every single person to know everything about everything. Having specialized experts about a thing have authority in how that thing is, decided. I mean, that's
Follow the money.
I mean, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, follow the money, then you'll find out why Dr. Fauci's where he's at, why
Well-
Bill Gates is where he's at, and
Probably
follow the
oversight
money.
committees and things. And
To a degree, you're right about that, because certain states from certain religious persuasions want certain things taken out of those books and not taught. The indoctrination thing that you talked about earlier, that you touched on, there is some of that in schools, and I think we should have secular educations. I think it should be fairly vetted, and I think we should have a wide variety of opinions, sort of like the evolution religion thing, creation thing. Hey, there's a couple of different opinions here, maybe even a third or fourth one, and including that and teaching some critical thinking skills, and maybe things will just work itself out in the end. But
Well, it's like a professor told me, you go to school to learn what you don't know, not what you do know.
Yeah, interesting.
It's kind of like management. You know what the person's strengths are, but you teach to their weakness so they get stronger in other areas.
Okay, let's move on. We've covered that one pretty well, and that's a huge topic. Okay, so the next thing that's up on my notes is systemic racism and solutions for that. And I know that you love this one. Let's listen to all our answers here. I'm gonna get
Next
another
question.
drink of water. I thought my answer was pretty decent. I don't think I could have, in 60 seconds,
Yeah, I guess.
explained it.
And I just take a different position because I've seen what the civil rights movement was all the way from when I was a young man. I remember that. I remember the way the blacks were treated in Indianapolis. They had one street they could live on. They had marginalized jobs, but they had a family unit. And then we had good old Lyndon Baines Johnson come along and had this great society, which basically told them, break up the home, have babies, and we'll give you more money. They created a welfare system, which has wrecked the black community. And whites are just as impoverished in certain areas. So I have a problem with the idea that there's a whole bunch of racists running around. Your definition of systemic racism is not what I heard the other two talking about. I just don't agree that there's systemic racism.
So,
I think there's a hell of a lot of prejudice.
what are your thoughts on that before I sort of expound and elaborate on exactly what I'm talking about? Because I don't think I think Luke's very naive. I think Luke's naive, and I know we're beating up on Luke a lot, but I think he's naive to think that his children would never see a black person getting shot or beat down is absurd. Does he know nothing about the 50s civil rights movement? Those people had fire hoses turned on them, dogs bit, all this stuff's available on the internet. And is his kid?
And that's
are
my
his kids
point.
not
I
living in
remember
reality or what?
the lady from Detroit that went down to Mississippi and ended up dead.
Yeah.
There was
There you
you had the freedom marches, you had the freedom riders. There was a lot went on. So when black kids today go on about systemic racism and being oppressed, you don't have a friggin' clue.
You don't have a clue. Just like we don't know about the sacrifices people in World War II did with rations and everything else. What do you got for us?
Well, I feel like that's unfair. I mean, there definitely is systemic racism. It's been here the whole time. It may not be in the same form it was before. You may say it's not as extreme as before. It's still here. I mean, you can't discredit somebody's, struggle just because the struggle of their, fathers was worse. I mean, it just seems unfair. I know that it's not right. So let me give a little background. I did study some gender studies, racial studies at Western Michigan University.
What a liberal. He's a liberal. Let's get him out of here.
Oh,
Get him
no.
out. No, I'm just kidding.
Just out of curiosity, see what they had to say. And, I also, got a
You drank the Kool-Aid.
degree of, general psychology, school science at Western. So like I studied the scientific method, how you can know things. I like philosophy. And what am I trying to say here?
That's why you're here.
What they told me, what I'm trying to tell you is what I learned in there. I agree with a lot of it. I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're making up figures. They have like statistics. They control for income. They control for every other factor other than race in so many different studies that say that it is it's statistically significant to say anything other like that. It's real. It exists.
So Gordon,
you can't minimize it.
Gordon Evans' question was something along the lines of, do you believe in systemic racism or that there is systemic? And when I see the word systemic, I think systems, and I think that's how everybody defines it. Mm-hmm. So like government systems, hey, there's going to be a government program that's going to, like for example, and I'm talking like a couple hundred years, right? The Manifest Destiny thing where they said, hey, if you go out west and you populate out west and you occupy this land, you're going to get 40 acres and that's going to be yours, right? Or however much land that you occupy out there. Yeah. And a lot of people went that way. Mostly white people went that, and it benefited whites vastly.
But how many people during the land grants and all that?
And the argument, Ron, and I'm not saying you need to agree with us, I'm just telling you what my version of this is. And the argument about systemic racism is that policies by the white majority ruling class, even 100, 200 years ago.
But the thing is, most of those have changed. They're
But-
not the same.
but let
And
me
that's
just-
where I'm getting
But
to.
let me just say, so it's like the stock market, right?
Yeah.
What they're saying is that these people several hundred years ago that did what they did, they went out there and they took a risk to go do that. I'm not saying it was, like just given to them and everything was honky-dory. They had to fight Native Americans. They had to fight, all the weather and everything else, right? The ability of being disconnected from society, so to speak. There's a lot of hardship out there. So they've earned some of what they did. But the point is that this generational wealth that was small back then has built up over time, much like a small investment in the stock market. You throw $10 into a 0-year-old newborn, and over 20 years, it's going to be $100,000 or whatever.
No.
And that's what systemic racism, I think, is.
No,
is
not
is
really,
part of
because
it.
you're making the assumption that everybody got a piece of that. And it didn't
Who
work
did?
out that way.
Not always. but for example, this land argument in our modern. Let me bring it back to. Let me bring it back
After the Civil War, if they'd actually give the people that were slaves 40 acres and a mule, that would have been fine.
Which they didn't.
Which they didn't, and that's kind of
part
like
of
the
the-
Native Americans. They'd make a treaty and break it.
Exactly. That's part of the
The
argument.
nation's not perfect, but this BS, we're all a bunch of racists, and there's systemic racism, is a bunch of crap.
So let me pull it to our modern day, Detroit, where you get
Oh, God help Detroit, they're so
where you
screwed
get
over, it's pathetic.
where you get predatory lenders, you get interest rates that are not favorable, and their white counterparts in similar jobs and similar income levels. They get better interest rates.
And who was the mayor? Who was the mayor of Detroit when a lot of this was going on?
I talk about the hip hop mayor guy. I forget his name. Kwame Kilpatrick.
No, I'm talking about Coleman Young.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So you have.
But he doesn't regulate banking. He doesn't regulate interest
But
rates.
he had a voice. He could have done something,
Oh,
and that's my point. You only have blacks are no different than whites. You have people that run away with a lot of money.
So, but all I'm saying is that when Gordon Evans says, "Do you believe in systemic racism?"
I
my
do not.
answer is essentially yes, because I see things like Detroit. I see legislation like redlining with a different data set. I see that the
Has that not stopped?
No, it hasn't. I think that the system that we don't get to see every day because we don't participate in it necessarily. I don't work in the insurance agency. I don't work at the bank. But I talked to some of those people and they're like, yeah, that stuff still goes on. In fact, there was a recent lawsuit over in Detroit. This lady won a couple $100,000 or something. She went to the bank to deposit the money and they gave her a bunch of hassle. So I think she sued another bank because they wouldn't cash a check. And then she ended up going to another bank and they deposited the money for her. So it just goes on and on and on. And I just think that there's a lot of society, the system that a guy like you, a guy like me, a guy like James, might not necessarily see, but that does exist. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that it does with a lot of anecdotal things that I've seen on the macro level. That's all.
Invisible knapsack, if you've heard of that.
Never heard of it.
It's just some list. It's not including of everything, but it's like a list of different privileges you aren't even aware of. Like, for example, Band-Aids are skin colored for us.
Oh.
Just some simple little thing like that.
That's interesting.
Like I can go into a room and reasonably expect that most of the people in that room are going to be of the same skin color as me, or talk like me, or have a similar background as me. I'm not going to feel like I have to speak out for, like, I'm not the one person
See,
of my race.
this is where I have a problem, because you're getting that theory when you had Martin Luther King talk about integration and inclusion.
Yeah.
And now we've gone to the Malcolm X view of segregation, separation, whites are evil. That's why I have a problem with all this. You guys don't go back and see the 60s. You didn't see the damn towns burning down in the 60s like I did. And it's like I told my son, I've seen this before, it will pass. When this election's over, this stuff will go away.
Hey, I'm nobody, but I've watched a lot of stuff about Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And I think the problem with Dr. Martin Luther King was a bit of the integrationist stuff, in the sense that when you want to integrate, it's kind of like economic policy. when you want to do trade with another company, another country, that in so doing, like we ship manufacturing jobs to China, eventually the U.S. is going to lose some power. And the Martin Luther King integrationist stuff makes whites feel like they're losing power. Where Malcolm X, on the other hand, was a segregationist saying, blacks need their own power, they need their own economy, they need their own businesses, they need their own cash.
And do you believe that?
What?
That they need to be separate?
I'm not saying that.
Separate but
I'm
equal?
just saying that.
You want to be like
no, I'm not
South?
saying that.
No.
I'm just saying that Dr. Martin Luther King had a whole different mountain to climb, because what he was doing was taking power away from the system.
Right.
And Malcolm X was giving power to a whole group of people that didn't have power, and said, just leave us alone, let us do our own thing. It's kind of like what libertarians talk about. Leave us alone. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, leave us alone.
Needs to stay the hell out of most things.
And all I'm doing is making that distinction, is that Martin Luther King had a much bigger hill to climb, because other people felt like their power was getting taken away, which is why you have all the fights and the struggles and the hoses and the dogs and that kind of stuff. That's all. That's all.
In the end, they both got killed, though.
Of course.
Anti-establishment here.
And here we are, and I think with a different system of oppression, with the thin blue line business. That's my opinion about that. I think that's a system of oppression. So when Gordon Evans talks about systemic racism, I think of the police forces and different cultures there. And Black Lives Matter certainly would be on board with what I kind of allude to there.
Black Lives Matter is a communist front organization.
I know you're going to
Marxist.
I know you're going to get a BLM tattoo. You're big fan.
Bite my living.
I got something to say about that. Like, people are individuals, groups, organizations. Black Lives Matter, that's a grouping of individuals. There are definitely Marxists in Black Lives Matter.
The three ladies that organize it are very plain. They may have scrubbed off their website.
We probably have libertarians that are Marxists.
Well, I don't know who, but I guess so.
You haven't met the people on the east side of the state.
I guess not.
They're
I haven't met one yet.
Buckle up.
They're just anarchists.
There's such a wide shades of gray to everything in libertarianism. Even socialistic libertarians.
The point I want to make to you, both of you, you don't recognize what's gone on in the world in the past when a communist system. They're trying to create a revolution. Is what they're trying to do to this country.
Is that bad, though?
Yes. At the end of the day, you'll find out how bad it'll be. Well, I'll probably be long gone by then.
We can only hope. Okay, moving on. I'm kidding, Ron. Okay, let's move on. I know the systemic racism thing is...
It's an issue I just do not agree with, period. And I said that before, and I'll continue.
Have you ever read here's a question. Have you ever read a book on systemic racism? He's taking a
class.
No,
because I'm not going to read that crap that some damn professor that's never worked a day in their life put out.
Okay,
I'm not going to do it.
We'll let the listeners
I had a lady write me, and she's reading
comments.
15 of these different books about white privilege and white this.
You know how I know white... Do you think white privilege exists? Do you think it's a thing, white privilege?
Hell yes. Lawrence Winky's the most privileged white man I know.
You know how I know white privilege exists? Here's how I know, without a shadow of a doubt. Because immigrants, maybe you don't like this answer, coming to this country in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of them, like Italians, were not considered white.
No.
They were not. And
Irish
it was
too.
And their struggle, their strive was to become white, to access that level of privilege in this country. That's no joke. That's how you know white privilege is a thing, and I think it still is today.
I have something I kind of want to explain, like something that I kind of used to teach myself what I thought privilege is. Basically, different advantages. Everybody's got different privileges. Everybody does, based on whatever their background is, however they look, whatever they know, how much money's in their bank account. Somebody that's got a wheelchair might have a privilege to use handicap parking. There's different privileges in different situations that are better than others. But the gender studies, all those social justice warriors that people like to call them, are trying to say is that white male privilege, on average, is better than most other privileges.
And you know who thought of about half of that? It's the ladies from the 60s that are the women liberation people. And they've gotten school and they educated a bunch of brain dead kids to think that way. Sadly, you went to Western Michigan and got the Kool-Aid poured in your head.
You didn't go to
So
Hawkins
for all those
University.
old people like me that think this is a bunch of BS, consider writing my name in when you vote. That's all I got to say about
That's right.
that.
Hawkins for non-systemic racism values.
Yeah, because they're wasting a hell of a lot of tax dollars in this state for the governor to teach this.
I
crap.
will say to your point, that in the 63rd district, which is 93% white, that the issues that Luke Howell's talking about, Black Lives Matters, that's not going to resonate.
No.
Systemic racism,
Well,
that's not going to resonate.
The Kalamazoo County portion where they've got the whacked out pink hat pottery ladies, it'll work out real well for Matt.
So
You know, that's probably where his less than 80 votes came from, because that's some of it said I was a Republican.
So that's something you have to think about when you're running as a politician, right? What message is going to resonate with the voters? And often what you see is politicians curbing their answers or softening their answers to maybe appeal more, and they're not being honest by doing so, I think.
No.
And I think that, we're pretty honest, and Luke Howell, to his credit, is honest. He could have said something totally different.
Yeah, but Luke reads the DNC talking points, and that's what he parrots. So he hangs right in there.
No independent thought whatsoever.
No.
Unless it's about
And let's face it, when he goes to Lansing, whatever, he's going to be
a party line vote.
He's going to be a Democrat version of Matt Hall.
All right,
Whatever
moving on.
leadership tells him, he'll march up that hill and get shot
Moving
because
on.
he got
Moving
no
on. We got a
fault.
while to go yet. You got a bedtime?
Not necessarily. I do have to work in the morning. The girlfriend's asking
What
where
time?
I'm at, but
Tell her you're hanging out with your new best friends.
do you have any estimate on how much longer you're trying to go tonight?
Yeah, if you want to leave, you can leave. You can take off. Oh, no, I was just going to continue to watch the video. It's an hour-long video, but, I was going to chop it up into slices and put it on the internet. Huh?
I'll quit talking.
Huh.
You know, you're talking to a guy that's son's half Asian. He married a black girl. He moved into my mother's home and they burned it down. So you want to know about racism is? I know what racism is. But would the FBI investigate?
You know
no,
what's-
because they didn't burn a cross.
You know what's funny about that is Lawrence Winkie tonight in tonight's meeting didn't know you had two
Oh, you didn't know
two
jack
black
shit.
grandkids. I'm like,
got
I'm thinking to
four.
myself, Lawrence, do you not ever listen to what Ron talks about?
I got 4 black grandsons
Or
and I
4 black
got
grandsons.
2 granddaughters that are quarter Asian now. My daughter's half Asian. So
Well, there you go.
You know, I've lived diversity all my damn life, so I got tired of the EEO bullshit. And the
All right,
federal
one more
government.
question, and maybe you got to go. I don't know, but here we go. So this is about what is this about? Improved criminal justice and confidence in the justice system. This is
Get rid of corrupt judges.
okay. We're gonna skip past those guys' answers, and we'll just talk about our stuff. So this question, Ron, if you remember, was how would you improve the criminal justice system and confidence in the justice system? I don't remember what even your answer.
I
was.
don't even.
You want to listen to what your answer
Looks
was?
Yeah,
like
well-
you two are the third and fourth speakers.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're at what are we at?
Skip 2
21
minutes ahead. I think.
21:29. What's it?
Black. I said elect.
I can hear it. If I don't read those transcripts, I can understand.
The Luke Howell didn't mute his microphone, so that's shame on him. Of course, Gordon Evans didn't either. Anyway, I don't really have a lot to say about that. I thought I answered that pretty well.
And the point being, if you go to my website, you can see how I talk about the probate court system is so corrupt in this state. It's pathetic.
You know what else is disgusting about the justice system here in America, not just Michigan, is the money extraction mechanisms they use for probationary type crimes with ankle bracelets. The people that have those things on actually have to pay them, and it's a privately run company. It's part of that whole privatization thing.
Well,
Bill had a kid. Jill knows one of his kids had an ankle thing on or something, or he had to go somewhere. $50 a week, this guy.
Yeah.
And for poor people, that's a lot of money.
That is.
Especially if you have a criminal record. Good luck getting a job. I mean, there's so many things that compound.
Well, and see, you
good
want to talk
recidivism.
about white privilege and old white people? Well, the probate court system's taking care of that because adult protective services come in, they declare you incompetent, and then they throw you up under a professional guardian. They're all a bunch of lawyers, and the judges is in on it, so they all profiteer off of whatever you little bits you've accumulated in life. It's a very corrupt, and Michigan's the worst in the United States. It used to be Florida, but we've moved up to #1. We ought to be proud of ourselves.
We're number 1 on what was that?
Probate court corruption.
You got anything? Well, yeah, worst in roads, #1 in that.
I think I'd like pretty much everything Ron was saying there. Yeah, like I think he was alluding to decriminalization of drugs, so you don't have the drug war, because that just gives them so much freedom to just steal all your rights and privacy, and
And
it's
you
an
don't-
unwinnable war.
And you don't need a friggin' Humvee pulling up in front of your
Yeah.
house, 5 guys jumping out in up armor to kick your door in.
Hell no.
No knock warrants. I mean, what is Black Lives Matter's fighting about there too? Right, Breonna Taylor, no knock warrant.
Yeah, and
dude
who-
shooting.
And who put the legislation in to
Rand
take
Paul.
care of that? Rand Paul. And who's the idiots that mobbed him coming out of the Republican committee?
Well,
National-
he's
Because that's the
He-
problem. You got a bunch of people that
Yeah.
don't think things through. They're not educated. They want to be, but they're not.
You mean Dr. Ron Paul is not educated? Or Rand?
No, I'm talking about the clowns that mobbed him, and quite honestly,
You're about
I
that.
would agree with him. If the police weren't there, they probably would have heard
He
him.
was baiting the crowd, I think, there. But anyway.
Well, that's your opinion, not mine.
Okay. Moving on. Okay, here's the next question. We're moving fast. The environment, climate crisis, okay? Anyway,
Bad software.
I don't have anything else to say to that. I mean, I think history,
Yeah,
the human activity of history speaks pretty clearly about
Well-
species decline.
Hey, I lived in Greenland,
Yeah?
and I look at it this way. When I got a clown in Ann Arbor telling me I need to listen to Rachel Maddow because I'm not a satellite analyst, because I can use Google Maps to look at where I was at in Greenland, and I don't see the ice cap going away, that I'm a climate denier. Well, I hate to tell you folks, you got bigger problems than carbon if the
Well, the
the
last
dread fault breaks, bend over, kiss your rear end going, because you're going to glow in the night.
the last thing was jobs in the economy, but we'll wrap it up. Maybe pick this up next time and finish it out.
We're about halfway through there, I think.
Yeah, that's about halfway. I mean, you want to do one more? We'll do one more.
White bar.
What was left?
We'll do one more. There's jobs in the economy. There's housing shortage stuff.
Yeah.
There's health care and then gun reform. Of course, they threw me the gun reform first. And, I said, hey, libertarians are usually the gun. That's probably why they did that. Thinking
Yeah.
I'd be Mr. Second Amendment. Hey,
Yeah,
what am I going to do? Like you said and I said, there are lots of laws on the books already about guns.
There's enough already.
It doesn't matter. Criminals are going to get the guns. They're going to shoot people. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
We're a country of guns. I mean, oh my God, think about that monumental.
I kind of like the
Hey, let's
Texas.
just talk about these things without watching the videos.
Yeah,
So that
I
more you go
like
after
the
guns,
Texas
the
Burger
more
King
people buy
analogy.
guns.
well, the whole gun thing was thrown to me, and I was like, hey, you would think that this is like red meat for the libertarian guy, but Second Amendment, I guess.
Raphael and I we have different spectrums of.
I understand. At least it's my opinion that the Second Amendment was.
We're going back to flintlocks.
No, it was racist legislation put in so the slave owners could go chase escaped slaves without government intervention. And I
No, it's because the British were taking away the armaments, and the colonials wanted the right to defend themselves. That's what it came down. What had nothing to do with slavery.
Okay.
And that's my problem. Everything now wants to be, it's racist. White people did this, that, and the other. No, there was a reason that the country did what it did. We got rid of a king. Unfortunately, we've got a queen here in Michigan now, but. No, there was a very valid reason.
I thought your talk about red flag laws was interesting.
Yeah,
Criminals have the guns, regardless of legislation, they're going to get them.
yeah.
And then there was a suicide mental health thing in there too.
That was
from somebody.
Luke's.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that
it was Luke. Luke's worried about people.
Okay. The other thing was jobs in the economy. What about? I can't read my own writing. Access to economic training for jobs and access to economic opportunity and COVID impact. 3 questions in 30 seconds. Go.
Holy shit.
Just get the government the hell out of the way.
I think you're talking about college debt, or somebody did. Skills, what kind of skills? Somebody's like, oh, we should train for skills. I'm like, what, for service jobs? So I can ask you what you would like to eat. The government created jobs. I said the government doesn't really create jobs. They create markets. Entrepreneurs get into those markets and then create jobs, potentially, right? We could talk about that, but Pietra said, oh no, the government does create lots of jobs. We just certainly...
No, the government creates a lot of jobs because it enlarges the bureaucracy all the time.
It's a weird feedback loop.
Yeah, and quite honestly...
And the taxpayer is oppressed because we have to fund top-heavy
Yep.
administrative overhead. And the other thing was, Pietra talked about free college, and I think maybe Luke Howell might have touched on that too. But
my point was, free is never free.
But I have written down here, Britain has college and training, and they still have poor people.
Yeah.
So we think that college and training and this job is going to eliminate the poverty problem.
I don't know if you
Right?
recall, but Obama told everybody they should go to college. Well, that's not.
It's not for everybody, no.
No.
In another minimum wage thing, Luke Howell was like, oh, we need a minimum wage, $15 an hour. Why he thinks 15's the number, why not make it 25, right? I mean,
Let's be California.
right, if a good minimum wage means that, let's pay everybody 25 then. Why 15? Why are you such a low baller?
Well, unfortunately, after COVID, if you go look at the business strips, you see a lot of closed up businesses. So $15 an hour may be a lot of money in the future.
But what's interesting is $15 is about $30,000 a year,
Yeah.
right?
It's nothing. So
Beans, yeah.
Especially with a family of, say, 3.
The problem with minimum
You're in
wage,
poverty still.
It's an artificial number that nobody understands. And even the federal government figured that one out because you have a base salary, and then you go around regionally in specific areas that they inflate extra money that employee gets because of where they live. Now,
Yeah.
again, the government solution. In my mind, you just go back to the base salary. And if you don't want to live in that state, you leave. Because that's what state governments are for. If they're good, people will be there. If they're bad, they move elsewhere.
I mean, the minimum wage issue is definitely kind of a complicated thing. I wish I knew more about it, but I've definitely spent a lot of time thinking about it. And the minimum wage is kind of an arbitrary number. The more you increase it, the more cost of living is going to go up. However, cost of living has already just been going up naturally. Why isn't the minimum wage or whatever just kind of following behind that?
Well,
or why don't you base the minimum wage based off of the cost of living in your voting district, for example, or however you want to do it? Like, maybe that's what it should be.
Yeah.
One of the arguments is that minimum wage hasn't been increased by the congressional people, like at the state level or at the federal level.
2009 was it?
It doesn't track inflation, and a lot of people says it should just track inflation. Set it and forget it is that model. Luke Howell, again, to the talking points, this guy, he's like, many people are taken for granted, and who's essential, and all are essential workers, all minimum wage workers. Well, he assumes. I mean, like people at Meyer, that's a union job.
Yeah.
Those people get paid pretty decent
Yeah.
for stocking shelves and doing that work.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
kinda
it
like-
all needs to be done. I'm not minimizing
It's
that.
kind of like Biden coming out and
As good as Costco.
saying
Right?
he could stay at home in the basement because some poor black lady was stalking his super.
Well, I saw
He's
that
an
video. That
idiot.
wasn't that big of a deal.
No, but he's still an idiot.
Housing was another thing we talked about. Safe and affordable. What policies would you do for safe and affordable housing? That's when I said the comment to the homeless. Maybe shelter is a house, but everybody took that as homeless shelter. But what I meant is a place to get out of the elements, like this guy in Southern California who's building these uber super tiny homes for these people, just to get them out of the elements, get them out of the heat, get them out of the whatever, little place to put their stuff. Doesn't have any running water, doesn't have a toilet, none of that. It's just a place. And that's kind of what I was talking about there.
And that
then
was
you
the
talked
point.
about the trailer thing.
That's my point.
thought that was smart.
If we can go to Iraq and we can put up trailers, and that trailer had just what you said. it had a bed. I had a guy that was in the other half of it. I never saw him. He was out in the boonies all the time, or he got shot. I don't know which. But anyway, that was one half of it. The other half, there were 2 more people. And then we had a community shower and a community toilet in a large area. So you're talking probably, I'm guessing,
Well,
maybe 20 acres.
and I will say that.
And that's where they housed a bunch of people.
I will say that, these folks with mental issues or some other things, those places can tend to become ghettos to a degree. And so
That's where you have to bring in the mental health part of it.
some professionalism to manage all that.
Yeah.
And I get all that, and I'm okay with that. We talked about code and how it discourages tiny home stuff or park communities like you're talking about. With government restrictions and requirements that they then have to undo, like when tiny houses become popular. Even
Well, you
in
take
towns.
these brownfield areas, there's land available to set that complex up. Battle Creek's got areas.
Oh,
I'm sure Kalamazoo does. Hell, maybe Lawrence will give part of his greenhouse area for one.
I doubt it.
But, that's my point. We could be doing that, and that's something that can be done at the local as well as the state level.
Well,
So,
what's as a business person, the thing that's cheap and affordable. I mentioned that it's a struggle between business profits and your heartstrings. There's no such thing as cheap and affordable and making money. I don't think.
but I think
For most of the home builders and
I think you'll agree with me that we all have a social responsibility to society. And that's where we fail.
that's where we fail.
And that's where we fail.
Well, and on that topic, do you have any thoughts on the housing thing? Living out of your car is cool?
Not necessarily. I do have thoughts and stuff. Living out of your car is not necessarily the best thing, But guaranteed
could.
housing would be nice but it's definitely a costly, prospect to consider.
Why are we guaranteeing people housing?
What's that?
Why are we guaranteeing housing?
I don't think
Well,
anybody...
I wasn't saying that. I wasn't proposing that. I was saying if we would, it'd be, very costly.
Yeah, no, what I'm talking about is for people that are homeless to get them up, get them on their feet, and then get them out. Get them
Okay.
back into society.
What about
And that's where we're failing. We just leave people crap out.
what about what some people are talking about, a debt jubilee? You think some of these people, I mean, there are mechanisms on the books already to
Hey,
go,
it worked for the
to go-
Jews. I don't know why it wouldn't work for us.
but there's already mechanisms on the books to get to go bankrupt and wipe out your debt, except
No.
for student loan.
Yeah,
of course.
and guess who did that? The United States Congress.
Well, of course, they
And
want the money.
same way they screwed
want
up the
their
post
They want
post
their
office.
money. Absolutely, I get that.
Yeah.
I don't.
And then who signed on to all the student debt?
Well, of course, that's predatory lending to a degree, but the only other problem with debt jubilee type stuff that I have, or like bankruptcies like that wipe out all your debt, is the people that tend to do that.
Cycle
If
right
they end
back.
up getting back in debt again, and they okay, another jubilee, it's like another 7 years to rack up all the debt and
No.
then have it forgiven. I
Well,
mean,
it's-
how do you
it's-
manage that?
It's the same thing with immigration policy.
yeah.
When Ronald Reagan
Diminished
cut the
returns.
deal, they were supposed to, stop. And what have we done? We done anything but that. So,
Healthcare was another issue. Access and affordability to healthcare. And I said, and I think you agreed, this is really more of a federal matter. The state only has a limited budget of about $10 or $11 billion in its discretionary spending for things like police, fire, the operation of the state. And there's simply no money there because we're busy wasting it on other things.
and everybody forgets when we decided.
Can't even do roads right.
When we decided to sign up for the Medicaid under Obamacare, I think there was a 10-year funding by the federal government, and that goes away. Well, guess who has to pay after that? The state of Michigan.
We do.
Yeah. And you think we're going to be able to afford that?
And I mentioned that state debt. We've got there's possible pools of money or tools that we could do, but if we're going to pay for this, we got to get rid of that, whatever that happens to be.
Well, and I think you agreed. I still think we need to look at a state bank.
Yeah, I like the state bank
Taxpayers
idea.
ought to be putting their own money back in their own pocket.
And of course, a couple, I think maybe Luke and the green guy, John Pietra, he was like, oh, universal health care and universal basic income, or, those talking points again.
Well, and I explained universal basic income to my son.
Yeah?
That was George McGovern said that when he ran against Nixon. That was one of his proposals. The thing you have to realize, if you're going to do that, all welfare goes away. All Social Security goes away. So you got a whole bunch of things that have to go away, and then everybody gets the same little pot. So welcome to the world of socialism, folks.
Healthcare for you? Is there any libertarian solution for healthcare?
Gosh,
Besides paying with a chicken and maybe, your firstborn or something?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think the model is complete. We've got a healthcare system based on employment model.
We do.
And complicated by the lobbyists.
So you have to unravel all that over time, right? You have to.
Well,
what instead of bulldozing it, you have to tear it down. But some people want to bulldoze.
That's the difference with me. I've learned in a bureaucracy, when you try to do this, somebody else is going to do that. You just got to bust a thing, period. You go in and you break it. And for all they want to say about Trump, he's like the bull in the China closet.
You sound like Trump.
Break it. Well, you have to, because it won't get fixed any other way.
Or who's the guy, the first guy that gave Trump Trumpism? He's not a Trump guy anymore. He was in the administration.
I haven't. Oh,
What's his name? He was the chief editor.
Breitbart?
Breitbart. He's dead.
I can't think of that guy's name.
He was the architect of that break shit, and then
But that's
rebuild it.
really, that's actually what you got to do within a big bureaucracy. If you don't, it doesn't get it gets moved around a little bit, but it never gets fixed.
I think I've heard one of the biggest problems with our healthcare system isn't necessarily the insurance part, that insurance made things become more expensive. The biggest problem is that so much, just healthcare costs so much in the United States. That's where they've got, medical tourism, I think they call that, to, do different surgeries. It's cheaper to fly to Italy or whatever. I don't even know if it's Italy.
It's Mexico, and
yeah.
Canada, I think, too. Maybe.
Here's what the Japanese do. They have a Ministry of Health.
Mm-hmm.
They break it out by prefecture, which is our states. But they say, doctor, this is what you can charge. Insurance company, this is what you can charge. They dictate how much the fees are going to be. You don't see the Japanese doctors out playing golf every 3 days.
This is going to be a power struggle.
And big pharma.
Your model would be a power struggle from the wealthy elite doctors who make potentially millions of dollars a year.
They're not
and
going to be
have
happy.
a certain lifestyle.
They're not going to be happy. But if you want to fix the healthcare system,
Coming down to poverty wages in relative terms.
But if you want to fix the healthcare system, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it.
Yeah, where are all the costs? So when you do like a root cause analysis, okay, why does healthcare cost so much? Well, 30% of it is insurance company middlemen.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you try to make a claim, they'll try to maximize their profitability, not your well-being. And then, other costs like the technology, supposedly, the medications, the salaries, and then you get to the lower level. So there's a lot of fat, top-heavy stuff that can be done away with.
It's administrative bureaucracy. It needs to go away. But
nobody's really done a real analysis about any of that. And would the doctors flee to another country then and go practice where they can make more money?
Where are they
and collapse the system?
Where are they going to go? They can't go to Canada. They can't go to Mexico.
Money's here.
It would literally be a new Doctors Without Borders. They're going to go see where they can get the most money,
Yeah, and let's not say all doctors. There's a lot of doctors that do a lot of they go and do free work.
Medical malpractice insurance. A lot of doctors say, well, I got to charge this much because my insurance is that much.
And I will tell you, my mother was a nurse.
Right?
She had to carry that stuff. And she wasn't unionized, and this is before nurses actually made a decent wage. So, yeah.
But you're not suggesting cutting nursing wages. You're saying cutting doctor pay, which is exorbitant. Maybe.
They've got to control the costs. That's really what it comes down to. The doctor.
So, single payer is okay with you?
If the modeling's done right, but if they had to do it the half-ass way they did Obamacare, no.
So the interesting thing, the ultimate thing, in my opinion, is...
Personally, I'd like to see him go back. When I was a kid, the doc had his own little clinic, and you went to it. and you paid the doctor. You didn't have some damn insurance company. You
those
got to
are
file this, that, and the other.
Those were simpler times.
Well, yeah, and I looked at my mother's paper when I got born. It cost $25 friggin'.
What year was that?
1950.
Let's see something real quick. Go ahead and keep talking. I wanted to see what the time.
You're gonna compare what
I wanted
the
to see
value was then
the
to
time
now.
value of money on that. That was
1950.
1950, $25 in 20. Here we go. $25 equivalent. $269. So you were born for $269.
There you go.
But a birth in today's hospital.
Probably about $6 or $8 grand would be my guess. And then if there's
What is it?
complications, more. Okay.
Average price of hospital birth is $21,000.
All right.
Wow.
Proves my point. Medicine worked well when I was born.
Yeah.
Not now.
Wow, you were a real bargain.
Yeah.
You were cheap.
Yeah.
So you got to invent the time machine,
Frugal.
go back in time,
And actually,
give birth back there.
my mother's
It's all
mother,
tough. They'll be making tons of money.
she went with the doctor in the horse and buggy to take care of people. And you're laughing, but I'm being serious. I'm not joking.
Oh,
I'm from
I'm
Indiana.
sorry.
No, this is serious. I'm being serious. She
Okay.
used to go with old Doc Cotton out to take care of people.
From our audience viewers that are Amish, they will really appreciate your thoughts on that.
Well, I will tell you what, it worked back then, and also
allowed.
being from Indiana, and the fact that they treated John Dillinger, the FBI has been a corrupt, bad organization since day one.
Were we talking about healthcare? What are we talking about
I
now?
know, but I was bringing that point up because they did. Doc Cotton took care of Don Dillinger.
Last but not least, I really
He wasn't
gotta-
a bad guy.
Last but not least, I got to ask the question if Gordon Evans and the League of Women Voters were really giving us like a bone. You know what I mean? Like throwing in, and on my notes here,
All
the
right.
last question of the forum is a gun reform question. Are they pandering to us? Do you think? Do they think there's some hope for libertarians to get elected? They're going to give us the last word on a gun issue?
It was interesting. Well, were you the last or was I the last?
Should we look real quick?
Yeah, you might want to look because they probably thought I was going to toe the party line, which I did anything but.
President translate that to farms.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that was a great answer. I mean, libertarians, I think, have the answers there. I mean, you have the right to do that. The people that are doing gun violence aren't
They're criminals.
They aren't law-abiding citizens. Otherwise, they wouldn't be shooting their guns, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
So it's like, how do you solve the problem? You really need more police enforcement, I guess, or
No,
longer
please don't.
sentence terms because it's a violent crime potentially. I mean, I don't know why they're shooting their guns.
Well, and if you watch some of these, they don't show a lot of them, but if you see some of the videos, you got Antifa walking up to old white people and popping them off. That's not right.
I haven't seen that, but wouldn't
I
decriminalization of drugs maybe tamp down some of that firearm stuff? Are those firearms issues like on the north side, drug related or in Portage or wherever? I mean, I don't know.
Well,
Some
it's like
certainly
my
are.
wife was asking me about Colorado.
Why are people shooting
Colorado
guns?
legalized marijuana.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not outside of a lawyer that was 27 years old, and he decided we all had white privilege, and he shot some old 70-year-old guy in a pickup truck to prove his point when they were running out on the interstate blocking traffic. There hadn't been too much problems out there.
Okay, well,
And where I got property, if you come up there, I'll shoot your ass and bury it, and nobody will even know the difference because it's way up nowhere.
okay, that wraps it up, I guess, for us. Those were all the issues from the League of Women
Hey,
Voters.
I grew up in Indiana. They taught me a long time ago, if you shoot them, be sure to drag them inside before the sheriff shows up. That's all. That's the way, it's your property.
That was the League of Women Voters town hall, right?
You can cut that out.
In the Sixers.
Probably don't need to hear that.
This is like an hour and a half deal here.
Hey, that's what I told the farmers at the Farm Bureau thing here in Kalamazoo.
So Gordon Evans was the host from WMUK and an NPR local affiliate, Fran Eckenrode, I think was her name.
Yeah.
League of Women's Voters co-president.
Well, they got one in Calhoun and one in Kalamazoo.
And that was that. I appreciate the League of Women Voters inviting us,
Yeah.
at the very least.
Far better than the environmental group.
We don't get, you're right, we don't get a lot of free media opportunity. And my question is how many people are tuning in to
Yeah.
Public Media Network? I mean, 100 maybe? I mean, I don't know. A lot of them not even in our district because the Public Media Network doesn't go over there. Maybe some in Portage, but a very few amount of people.
Portage is the district runs at Sprinkle.
Yeah?
Yeah, Portage is not even.
Well, what's his name run from Portage against Hall in 2016 or 2018?
He lives.
I thought he was from Portage.
No, he lives way over on one of the lake things.
What's his name?
Maturin.
Maturin.
Yeah, I've been to his house.
Oh, yeah?
He's like
Yeah,
Winky. He's got all the Democrat signs out.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Who's he voting for? Luke Howell?
I
thought
Luke
Luke
don't
was-
have any signs. And the
He can't have Luke's signs out. He doesn't have any
And the
signs.
sad thing is, Luke,
Handmade.
the Kalamazoo
That's funny.
party put him up to running against me, and they can't even give him signs because he doesn't have a bank account.
Well,
Poor Luke.
poor Luke.
Yeah, so you folks that vote in the 63rd, if you want to vote for Luke Howe, just vote for an incompetent idiot, and you'll have a Democrat in Matt Hall. There you go. That's my say on that.
And so there we have it. We wanted to do a sort of summary on some of the things we said in that town hall, since we only had 60 seconds and now we have hours and hours and hours, as much time as we want and however we want to cut it, right?
Yep.
And that is that.